Welcome to Civil Science Academy. Today we are starting Unit 3 of Class 6, that is the earliest cities. Now this chapter is very important because it introduced the Harappan civilization, and also it is called as Indus Valley civilization. That is one of the oldest civilization in the world, and even UPSC asked the questions on it in both in the prelims and also mains. Okay, so whatever you learn today will stay useful for a long time. Okay, now you will study Harappan history again in later classes also, but today we will focus only on what is given in this Class 6 textbook. Okay, now in the time of British, the British government was building railway lines in India. Okay, and for that they needed thousands of bricks. Workers in the Punjab found heaps of well-baked bricks lying around the mount. They thought these are the strong bricks, so we can use them for the railway tracks. So they carried away many bricks without knowing their real value. But in 1856, some British engineers noticed these bricks and wondered where did these come from, and they don't look like ordinary bricks. So later archaeologists got curious too. The first detailed excavations were done by Sir John Marshall in 1920s along with the Dayaram Sanhi. Dayaram Sanhi excavated Harappa in 1921 and R.D. Banerjee excavated Mohenjo-daro in 1922. And guess what? Means what they discovered completely shocked the world. That is, they found an entire ancient city buried underground with houses, streets, drains and strong walls also. That's how the Harappan civilization came into light. Okay. Now that we know how Harappa was discovered, let's move to the next question. What is special about this city is? Okay. When we think of ancient times, we usually imagine small huts or villages, okay? But Harappan cities were totally different. They were carefully planned and structured and almost like modern towns. For example, Citadel and Lower Town. The archaeologist noticed something very interesting. That is, in the western part of the city was smaller but higher. This raised area is called as the Citadel. Okay, and the eastern part was larger but lower, and this is called as a Lower Town. And remember this difference, you should know this. Citadel means smaller but higher, and the Lower Town is larger but lower. This is important for exams. Okay, now the strong bricks and the town planning. The people of Harappa were the mastering buildings. Okay, they used well-baked bricks that have lasted for more than 4,000 years. Okay, and these bricks were not placed randomly. They were laid in special interlocking patterns, and that's why the walls were so strong and could survive for thousands of years, even against the flood also. Now imagine, these people lived thousands of years ago, but their construction was so good that even today also engineers are admits it, right? So special buildings on the citadels are, on the citadel archaeologists found the special buildings in each city had something unique. For example, Mohenjo-daro, here we find a famous great bath, and it was a large tank and made of bricks, and inside was plastered and made watertight and with a layer of natural tar, and steps laid down to the water almost like a swimming pool, and people probably used it for ritual bath on the special occasion also. For UPSC, great bath is one of the most important symbol of Harappan culture, and you can see here this is a great bath. Okay. So Kalibangan and Lothal, at these cities archaeologists found the fire altars. Okay, and these may have been used for sacrifices or rituals. So each city had its own special features. Now, as I told about the Great Bath, and it is well-baked bricks as I told, right? But you may wonder, why did people make this? Was it for swimming pool or for fun? But no, the Great Bath was used for something far more important, that is ritual bathing, as I told. On special occasions, important people of the city would dip into this sacred tank. For them, water was not just for cleaning the body, it was for the purifying the soul also. So this shows us the two big things about the Harappans. That is, they cared about cleanliness and public life also. They had organized planning and technology so advanced that their structures lasted thousands of years. So now think about it. When archaeologists discovered the Great Bath in 1920s, they were shocked. They realized that the Harappans were not just a farmers or traders. They were urban people with sense of culture, ritual and community of life. Okay. Now let's move to the next important part, that is houses, drains and street in the Harappan cities. And this is something that amazes even modern engineers. Okay, first one is house. The house of the Harappa were not small huts. Most houses were 1 or 2 stories high. They were built with well-baked bricks, and inside there were rooms and courtyard and even private bathrooms in some houses also. Imagine, people of 4,500 years ago already had bathrooms inside their homes, while in many other parts of the world such comforts came thousands of years later. So next we can talk about the drainage system. Now here comes the most impressive part. Okay, so every house had its own drain, and these smaller drains were connected to the bigger drains on the street. So each drain was built with the slope so that the dirty water could flow out easily. So drains were covered with the slabs or stone lids, which could be lifted whenever cleaning was needed. So archaeologists believe that the people must have appointed special workers just for cleaning drains. So doesn't that sound like a proper municipality system? So, in the UPSC point, the Harappan drainage system is considered one of the best in the ancient world, and it shows how advanced and intelligent they were. And also, we talk about the streets. Okay, now streets were also carefully planned, means they cut across each other at the right angles and making something like a chessboard pattern. Also, the houses and drains were planned together with the streets, which means the entire city was designed before building. So, just like modern town planning. So, and this is very interesting part. Okay. Look at this chart, and this will help you understand how the Harappan drainage system was worked. Okay, first see these red boxes. These are the houses, and some houses were single story or maybe double story. Okay, inside every house people had small drains to carry away dirty water. So now follow these blue lines coming out of each house. These are the house drains. Okay, each house drain is connected directly to the bigger drain, that is this one outside the house. So now look at this thick black line, and that's the street. Okay, alongside the street there was a main drain. See the thick blue of the running line along it, this one, and that's the one which collected water from all the smaller house drains. Okay, and finally these are arrows which they shows the direction of the flow. Okay, and this is amazing. So because in the time of 4500 years back, the Harappan has already built such well-planned systems. So houses, drains and streets are all constructed together as part of the one design. This is why we call Harappan's drainage system one of the most advanced in the ancient world. Okay. Now let's begin with the new crafts in this city. Okay, as I already told, in the Harappan cities, people started making things out of copper and bronze, and with this metal, they made tools, weapons, and ornaments. Okay, one of the most interesting things found from Harappan sites are beds, and blades. Okay, and this shows us how skilled they were in the craft work. And another important thing, they made seals, and seals were usually made of stone and had animal designs carved on them. And these seals were mainly used for trade. And now cotton was probably grown in the Meghar around 7000 years ago, and the actual piece of cotton cloth have been found at Mohenjo-daro that stuck to the lid of a silver vase, and also the some copper objects, and these are things amazing. Okay, now the another material they were used was faience, and faience is the artificial made material. This is not a natural one, and it has a shiny and glass-like surface. And people in Harappan times made bears, bangles, and small statues out of faience. Okay, and now the most of these crafts were made by the specialist. A specialist is a person who is specially trained to do one kind of it. For example, some were trained in making ornaments, and some in making tools, and some in making seals, like that. Now let's move to the next topic, that is life in the city. Okay, now imagine a very busy place like street full of people, workshop, traders, rurals and craftsmen all working together. Now rurals means they are probably planned the construction of special buildings and control the trade. In here, craftsmen means the men and women making beds, ornaments, tools, terracotta toys, these things. Okay, now scribes means people who knew how to write, preparing seals and keeping records. And also traders means traveling to far off lands and bringing back metals and stones and other goods. Okay, now what do we find in here? Archaeologists have found the wells, drains, streets, beds, ornaments, toys, and these objects tells us how lively this city was. Okay, means in here, remember, is the Harappan cities were planned and specialized, and also different groups of people had different roles, that is rurals, craftsmen, scribes, traders, and this division of work shows the organized urban life very advanced for that period. Means so Harappan cities were not just bricks and drains, they were center of busy life, like almost like modern cities in their own way. Now we move on the next topic, that is in search of raw materials. Now imagine you are living in a Harappan city thousands of years ago, and you are a craftsman. Okay, now you know how to make ornaments, beds or tools, but to make these things you need copper, tin, gold, silver and precious stones also, right? The problem here is these materials are not lying around in your backyard. You have to find them, so sometimes from very far away places. So this is where the story of raw material begins. So take now copper for example. The Harappans got it from the land we now call it as Rajasthan, and but not just that, they also sailed across the Arabian Sea and brought copper from Oman in West Asia, and just imagine the scale of their connections. Okay, now the copper alone was not enough, they needed tin also. Why? Because when copper and tin are mixed, they form bronze and a much stronger metal. Okay, the tin was not found easily in our region, so they probably brought it from places like Afghanistan and Iran. And now also the gold is always fascinating for humans, for the Harappans also, and it was the prized possession. Some of the gold used in the ornaments is believed to have come from as far as Karnataka in South India. And then there were the precious stones, carnelian, lapis lazuli, and others also, and these came from Gujarat and from Iran and from Afghanistan also. So, what does this tell us? The Harappan were not isolated, and they were part of wide network of trade and exchange. They knew what resources were needed and where to find them and how to bring them back. In a way, this makes them the early global traders of the ancient world. And this is not just a history to memorize, and this is an important reminder for us. So civilizations survive and grow only when they know how to connect with others, so exchange ideas and exchange resources. The Harappans were master of this art. Now move on to the next topic, that is food for people in the cities. Okay, so what did the Harappans eat? The diet was a mix of crops and animals, and even fish and wild animals also. The archaeologists have found remains that tells us the story. That is, the farmers in Harappan times grew a variety of crops, and they cultivated wheat and barley, that is the main grains, and along with that they also grew pulses and peas, and later on the rice was also grown and thought in a smaller amount also. And they didn't stop there, they also grown sesame and mustard, and which means they probably used oil in their food too. And to grow these crops they needed better farming tool. That is, one such tool was the plow, and it was used to turn the soil and make it ready for planting seeds. And of course, and crops also need water, so the Harappans built ways to store and supply water to the fields, and especially when plants were growing. Now let's think beyond crops. The Harappan also relied on animals, and they domesticated cattle, sheep, goat, and buffaloes also in the hot and dry summer months when grass and water were scarce. And large herds of these animals were probably taken to faraway areas in search of food and water. And the food wasn't just from the farming or herding. The Harappans also collected and ate things from the wildlands. So they caught fish and from rivers and hunted antelope and gathered other wild resources. Now, the next topic is the closer look of Harappan towns in Gujarat. The first one is Dhalavira, was in Run of Kutch on Kadirbet. Unlike other cities with the two parts, Dhalavira was divided into three parts, each with the stone walls and gateways. There were also the big open ground for public ceremonies also. And what's really unique here is the discovery of large Harappan script letters carved on the stone. Usually the script is found only on small seals. Okay. Now next one is the Lothal in the Gujarat near the Gulf of Cambodge, was famous for trade and the crafts, and it was close to the source of semi-precious stones, and archaeologists found a storehouse here and even a bed making workshop and with unfinished beds and tools, and this shows Lothal was a busy craft center. And now about the seals, and traders used them to stamp goods, and wet clay layer was pressed with the seal, making a sealing. If this sealing was unbroken, the goods were safe. Even today we still use seals for official work also. Now the last topic is the mystery of the end. Okay, around 3900 years ago, things began to change. The people slowly stopped living in many of the great cities. The use of writing, seals and weights declined, and long distance trade weakened, and raw materials became rare, and Mohenjo-daro streets filled with the garbage, and the drainage system broke down, and small poorly built houses even came up on the streets where big structures once stood. And why did this happen? We are not completely sure, but some scholars say rivers may have dried up, and others suggest deforestation and too many trees cut for bricks making and smelting copper, and also grazing by herds may also have destroyed vegetation, and in some places there were floods. And but none of these reasons fully explain why all the cities declined at the same time. It also seems that rulers lost control and people moved away, and sites in the Sindh and Punjab were abandoned, and the new smaller settlements grew to the east and south. And this was the end of the one great chapter, but history didn't stop. About 1400 years later, new cities rose again, and we will read about them in the later chapters. Okay, so that's it for Unit 3, and I will uploading Unit 4 in the coming days. If you found this video helpful, do support me and by liking, sharing and subscribing to the channel. And now take care, keep learning, and I will see you in the next lecture.